Rome had overthrown its kings. It had sworn never again to place its fate in the hands of one man. But freedom came with a price. The early republic was fragile. Power was divided. Authority was temporary. And while Romans argued in the Forum, their enemies did not wait. To the east and south lived the Volsci. To the north, the Sabines. And in the hills beyond Rome, the Aequi. They were not distant threats. They were close enough to see the smoke of Roman hearths. And they understood something Rome was still learning. A divided city is a vulnerable one. In the year 458 BC, Rome sent 2 consular armies into the field. One marched against the Sabines. The other moved east into the rugged highlands near Mount Algidus. This was Aequi territory, forested hills, narrow passes, ground that favored ambush, not formation. The Roman commander believed speed and confidence would be enough. He was wrong. The Aequi did not meet the Romans in open battle. They let them advance, let them climb, and then they struck. Roman forces found themselves surrounded. Supply lines were cut, escape routes vanished. The hills echoed with enemy horns and war cries. For the first time since the fall of the kings, a Roman army faced annihilation. Word reached Rome quickly. An entire consular army was trapped. Another was already committed elsewhere. The Republic had no reserve. The Senate gathered in fear. There was no time for debate, no time for elections, no time for balance. Rome needed decisive action. And that meant doing the one thing it feared most: handing all power to a single man. Messengers were sent beyond the city, across the Tiber, to a small farm worked by an old man and his plough. His name was Lucius Quinctius Cincinnatus. He was no stranger to power. He had held office before. He had also known disgrace, poverty, and loss. When the envoys arrived, they found him in the fields, hands dirty, clothes simple, life quiet. They spoke only one sentence: Rome is in danger. That was enough. Cincinnatus accepted the dictatorship, not for glory, not for revenge, but because the Republic had no one else. Within hours, the city transformed. All normal business was suspended. Every able-bodied man was ordered to report for service. Weapons were distributed. Supplies gathered. There were no speeches, no ceremony, only urgency. Cincinnatus gave the army one command: march. They marched through the night, through darkness, through exhaustion. By dawn, they reached Mount Algidus, and what they saw confirmed the worst. Roman soldiers trapped, encircled, running out of hope. Cincinnatus did not charge. He did something smarter. He ordered his men to dig trenches, barricades, an entire line of fortifications, built while the Aequi slept, believing victory was already theirs. By morning, the trap had closed. The Aequi were now surrounded. When the signal was given, the Romans attacked from both sides, from within and without. The hills that had once imprisoned Rome became the walls of an enemy grave. The Aequi broke, some fled, some surrendered. Many were taken captive. Rome had been saved, not by numbers, but by discipline, speed, and command. Victory was complete. Cincinnatus held absolute power. The army obeyed him. The Senate feared him. The people praised him. And Rome waited. This was the moment tyrants are born. Instead, after 16 days, Cincinnatus resigned. He gave up power, dismissed the army, returned to his farm. The Republic exhaled. Rome celebrated Cincinnatus as a hero, and rightly so. But history does not preserve lessons evenly. What Rome remembered was not the restraint. It remembered the power. That in crisis, one man could command everything. That law could be set aside. That freedom could wait. Mount Algidus became proof, not of humility, but of possibility. And that memory would return again, and again, and again. Rome survived Mount Algidus, but survival came with a precedent. The dictatorship had saved the Republic. One day, it would destroy it, and the wars were only beginning. Rome had survived its first great crisis. Mount Algidus had proven that the Republic could act decisively without surrendering itself to tyranny. But victory did not bring peace. It brought attention. Beyond Rome's southern borders lived a people who had watched the city carefully, not as admirers, but as predators. They were called the Volsci, and for generations they would test Rome's strength, its patience, and its unity. The Volsci were not nomads. They were not raiders passing through. They were settled peoples, controlling fertile plains and hill country south of Rome. Land Rome needed to feed its growing population. They fought differently. Where Rome relied on discipline and formation, the Volsci relied on speed, ambush, and relentless pressure. They did not seek one decisive battle. They sought exhaustion. And Rome, still divided at home, was vulnerable to exactly that kind of war. Year after year, the Volsci crossed Roman borders. They burned fields, captured livestock, threatened allied towns. Roman armies marched out, won battles, and returned home. And the Volsci came back again. There were no final victories, no lasting triumphs, only constant mobilization. For Roman farmers, this meant disaster. Men were called away from their land for months at a time. Crops failed, debts grew. When soldiers returned, they did not come back to prosperity. They came back to ruin. The Volsci Wars exposed a fracture that had existed since the fall of the kings. Rome's armies were made of common citizens. Rome's wealth was not. While the elite debated policy in the Senate, the poor paid for war with their labor, their land, and their lives. Anger spread. Plebeian soldiers began to ask dangerous questions. Why do we fight for a city that will not protect us? Why do we bleed for debts we did not choose? The Republic was winning battles and losing cohesion. Out of this endless struggle emerged a figure both celebrated and feared. Gaius Marcius Coriolanus, a brilliant soldier, a relentless enemy of the Volsci, a man whose victories earned him honor and whose pride earned him hatred. Coriolanus despised the political concessions being made to the poor. He believed Rome was weakening itself from within. When famine struck, he opposed grain relief. When the people protested, he demanded punishment. Rome exiled him. And in that moment, the Volsci gained something more dangerous than an army. They gained a Roman. Coriolanus crossed into Volscian territory, and there he was welcomed, not as a traitor, but as a weapon. He led Volscian forces with Roman precision, captured Roman towns, marched closer and closer to the city itself. Panic returned to Rome. The Republic had survived kings, dictators, and invasions. Now it faced something worse: a Roman general leading Rome's enemies. As Volscian armies stood near Rome's gates, diplomacy failed, threats failed. Only one thing remained. A delegation of women was sent, mothers and wives, to confront Coriolanus. Among them was his own mother. No army moved, no swords were drawn, and Coriolanus withdrew. The war paused, not because of strength, but because of memory. Rome was spared, but the lesson lingered. The Volsci never conquered Rome, but they changed it forever. They taught Rome that war could be constant, not episodic, that enemies did not need to destroy the city, only exhaust it, and that internal division was more dangerous than any foreign army. By fighting the Volsci, Rome learned how to survive long wars, how to keep armies in the field, how to endure loss without collapse. These were not glorious lessons, but they were necessary. Rome would defeat the Volsci eventually, not in one battle, not in one generation, but through persistence, through adaptation, through learning how to fight and how to endure. And as Rome hardened itself against its enemies, it also hardened itself against its own people. The wars were shaping the Republic, and the Republic was becoming something new. Rome survived Mount Algidus. The Republic had stood at the edge of disaster and pulled itself back. A farmer had become a dictator. Absolute power had been taken up and laid down again. And for a moment, Romans believed they had found the answer to crisis. But answers, once proven, invite repetition. And beyond Rome's borders, others were watching just as closely. This was a different kind of war. Not the desperate emergency of Mount Algidus, not a single decision that saved the state. This was endurance. Roman armies marched out year after year. Citizen soldiers left their farms again and again. Fields went untended. Debts accumulated. Families struggled to survive while their protectors were absent. When soldiers returned home, they did not return to peace. They returned to poverty. The Republic was winning battles abroad and unraveling at home. The Volsci were never fully destroyed, but they changed Rome. They taught Rome that war could be constant, that enemies did not need to conquer the city, only exhaust it. They forced Rome to keep armies in the field longer, to adapt logistics, to endure loss without collapse. And they revealed a truth the Republic could no longer ignore. Foreign wars and internal conflict were inseparable. Rome could survive enemies at its borders. It was division within that nearly broke it. The Volsci Wars did not end Rome's struggles. They deepened them. Because while Rome was learning how to fight longer wars, its people were learning how unequal that burden was. And that tension would soon erupt into something even more dangerous than invasion: civil conflict, class war, the struggle over who Rome truly belonged to. And that is where the next chapter begins. Rome did not defeat the Volsci in a single battle. There was no final blow, no moment of triumph that ended the struggle. Instead, there were years of marching, years of burning fields and rebuilt walls, years of citizens who fought abroad and returned home changed. The Volsci did not conquer Rome, but they taught Rome something essential. That survival was not about brilliance, but endurance. That victory did not always mean peace, and that the greatest danger to the Republic was not always beyond its borders. It was within. Rome was learning how to fight longer wars, how to sustain armies, how to harden itself against exhaustion. But in doing so, it was also hardening against its own people. The Republic endured, but the cost was unity. And as Rome grew stronger against its enemies, the tension inside the city continued to rise. The wars would continue, the legions would march farther, and the battles ahead would be larger, bloodier, and more decisive. But the struggle that truly threatened Rome, the struggle over power, class, and control, was only just beginning. And that is where the next chapter begins. If you've made it this far, thank you for walking through Rome's earliest struggles with us. If you want to continue this journey through its wars, its ambition, and the choices that shaped the ancient world, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you won't miss the next chapter when it's released. If this story added something to your understanding of Rome, leave a like. It helps the channel reach others who care about history told with depth and care. And most importantly, share your thoughts in the comments. Which part of Rome's story should we explore next? The struggle between rich and poor, the rise of civil war, or the men whose ambition reshaped the Republic forever? History lives through discussion. Let's continue it together.